Hi lovely humans, in this video we're going to be going through the Unit 3 DBQ about the Islamic empires. The first thing that we are going to do is go through and analyze the prompt. The second thing that we are going to do is talk about the different documents that you are going to see in this prompt. And then the third thing we are going to do is talk about how you can organize these documents into claims for your own response. If you go halfway down the first page, you are going to see the essay prompt. Here, you are going to see that this prompt is asking you to first off address causes and effects as seen by the word affected here. So I'm going to read through the whole prompt for you and then we'll break it down. It says, evaluate the extent to which the strengths and weaknesses of the Islamic empires that ruled much of Asia during the period 1450 to 1750 affected their rise and fall. Now, one of the things I put in here was a hint for you that you should address strengths as those rises and weaknesses as part of those falls. What I would do is going through and reading my documents first is I would try to figure out, is this addressing a strength of an empire or a weakness of an empire? And again, then combining and saying, if this is a strength of the empire, this is something that's going to allow them to rise or consolidate during the beginning of their time periods. And then chances are there's going to be a weakness at the end of those empires that's going to cause them to fall. And so that's how I would organize. You might have one claim that talks about strengths and two claims that talk about weaknesses, or two strengths and one weakness. It all depends on what your documents are telling you. But just remember that no matter what the documents are telling you, that everything in your essay should be historically accurate, including your claims. So if you feel like you're writing a claim that was not historically accurate, don't try to stretch the truth. Go back and look at those documents one more time. The second thing that is given to you is historical background. Historical background is really given as an opportunity for you to dive deeper into, well, which exactly empires are they talking about in this prompt, and hopefully give you a brain refresher of some of the ones that were around during this time period. So this one is going to be talking about the Ottoman Empire, the Safavids, and the Mughals, and you can see that as we go through and read our documents. So again, the first thing that I'm going to do as I'm reading through my documents, and this is especially true for people who need to pick up in terms of pacing or are looking for an easier way to understand the documents, the first thing I would always figure out is this a rise or is this a fall? Is it a strength or is it a weakness? And so as I'm going through these documents here, so document number 1 here is going to be about Suleiman the Magnificent from the Ottoman Empire. Two ways I figured out it was from the Ottoman Empire, if I didn't know who Suleiman was, is that I saw the word Constantinople here. Again, that is going to be modern-day Istanbul, which was part of the Ottoman Empire during this time period of the 1500s. In addition, they are going to mention the Turks, who we would associate with the Ottoman Empire as well. So document number 1 is really going to what I would consider be a rise document or a strength document. It's going to talk about Suleiman the Magnificent and how he's going to fairly govern the people that he is ruling over in the Ottoman Empire. It's going to talk in these lines here about how people are going to get put into office or get promoted within the office, one, because it is a gift of God, but then also because of good training. So he's not going to judge people based on how much money they have or who they know, their connections piece. It's really all about that good training and the unwearied zeal, or this idea that you're going to work hard. And this is something, again, even thinking modern day, like people want this within a government system. You want to be able to know that your hard work is eventually going to pay off. And so that's what document 1 is talking about. For point of view, you might discuss some of these things again, talking about who this person is writing to, so that because they are writing to the Austrian emperor, again, you may say like, hey, this is somebody who worked really closely with Suleiman the Magnificent. He saw the great things that were happening within the Ottoman Empire, so of course he's going to be writing in a positive manner, not only about his boss, but to other people, saying like, these are things that you should be doing within your empire, especially since the Ottoman Empire was prospering during this 1500s. And so again, those would be things that I would talk about if I was going to be writing my point of view for document number 1. Document number 2 is going to be your chart or your source that is not text-based for this entire DBQ. Again, you'll be given one of those throughout your entire test. This one is going to be talking about the Mughal Empire within India. And this one, as you can see from the sourcing, or as you can see from the very top here, is talking about revenues and expenditures. Now this one, usually throws people for a loop because they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be getting out of this. And so I would look at two things. I would look and see how much money are they getting through taxes or through revenue. And then the second thing being, what are they spending their money on? You can tell a lot about an empire during this time as well as modern day of what do they see as important based on what are they spending a good majority of their money on. And so the first thing I'm going to take a look at is you can see here the money that is going to be collected, and we're guessing that it's going to be collected via taxes. And then as I'm going through, you'll notice three separate categories. And the first of these categories, talking about the imperial nobility, really stands out to me of how much money they are going to spend. We would say almost 90%, if not more, of their money is going to be spent for expenditures for the imperial nobility, which means that that's the group that they care about the most within the Mughal Empire. Okay, and you can see it's broken down even farther. It talks about the Mughal nobles. Chances are that's their salary or what they're getting paid, animal allowances, and then also the enlisted heavily armed cavalry and regional troops. Again, these are going to be people who are working for the government during this time and enforcing government rules. And so that's really where we start to think about like what is important to the government, and maybe we would consider this a strength of the government that you have such a heavy emphasis on your military in terms of that they are going to be enforcing those laws. But at the same time, I might talk about this weakness here of, yeah, it seems like there's quite a lot of money that's being spent on the nobles. Again, we don't know how many nobles there are, but we know that that's way more money than is being spent on expenditures for our central military establishment. And again, looking at the central military establishment, which is 359, even your animal allowances are 371 here for the imperial nobility. So even those animals are getting more money put towards them and their well-being than some of our others for our central military establishment. And that's something that I would question or think more about. So again, we could talk about the economics piece here. If you are going to be talking about point of view, know that every single document you are coming across, whether it is a reading or it is going to be a chart like the one you see here, or a map, picture, everything has bias or everything has a point of view. So for instance, this one is going to be discussing certain expenditures or money pieces that the government is going to be spending money on. They're going to leave some things out. They're going to emphasize some other things. Chances are for point of view for this one, I would try to talk about who is going to be writing this document and who the audience is going to be. And so I might say, this is going to be an accountant from the Mughal Empire who's probably going to be giving this account to the Mughal emperor of this time so that they can see where their money is being spent. So that way that Mughal emperor knows, like, do I need to change where my money is being spent? How much have I collected? So on and so forth for that success. And so that's where I would talk about with point of view. And again, you might emphasize this idea here that it's showing that they're spending a lot of money for that imperial nobility. Document number 3 is going to be about our friend Akbar. Remember, Akbar is going to be the one who is religiously tolerant within the Mughal Empire, and you can see that as we read through the documents here. It's going to talk about several different religions in which he's going to go and talk to the lead person of that religion, in addition to learning about some of those practices. And so, as we talked about before, this is what people are going to consider a great emperor for the Mughal Empire, because he's going to be accepting of all people within that empire. You could then address the fact that, like, this document is not necessarily giving him the best light, and you'd really want to go back up to the sourcing then and talk about how this is a Muslim cleric and opponent of the religious practices of Akbar. So again, we'd associate maybe this person with like the practices of Aurangzeb, who comes after Akbar, and going with this idea that they wanted the Mughal Empire to be purely Muslim, specifically Sunni Muslim, and have those practices. And so of course an opponent of Akbar is not going to put him in the best light. And so that's what you could talk about with point of view for document number 3. Document number 4 here is going to be an outside source. And when I say outside source, it's not somebody who directly is from the Mughal Empire, although they are going to live in there. So this is somebody from France who's gone and lived or experienced several different places and is now writing about those experiences in a book. So think of this as like a memoir, and you're picking out, right, things that gave you those feelings, the goods and the bads. Document number 4 is going to be talking about how people within the Mughal Empire who had money are going to be able to pay essentially for their spot within the government system, or pay to have a higher role within government. And then it talked about later on how they are then going to have that authority over specifically the peasantry, but it also talks about artisans and merchants, and how the artisans, merchants, and peasants do not like that just because they don't have any money that they don't have a say in government, and that the people who do have money are able to do certain things against them within the government system. And so this is what's being talked about here. I would consider this a downfall of the Mughal Empire, is this political corruption, specifically when it comes to that money. And so that's what I would address here in document number 4. Last but not least is document number 5. Document number 5, again, is an outsider source because this one's coming from a British consul and merchant who just lived in the Ottoman Empire. So again, he's an outsider who's living in the Ottoman Empire, and he's really going to be talking about during this time, the late 18th century, of how during this time in the Ottoman Empire, they are not going to be trading with outsiders. So again, they're not going to be trading with the Europeans specifically, because they see them, again, you can see here in these lines, we should not trade, say they, with those beggarly nations who come to us to buy all of our riches. And so they see the Europeans as inferior during this time. And so that would be something that I would address then in these documents. With that being said, I'm going to stop right here, and then I'm going to create a second video, I think, that's going to go through and talk more about claims, and I will also go back and talk about outside evidence. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Bye.